Bonjour et bienvenue à notre leçon pour les pronoms ou le pronom I. Alors donc, nous allons étudier ce soir le pronom I et aussi c'est à la page 156 dans votre livre. Donc, si vous voulez ouvrir votre livre à la page 156, ça va être utile. Ok, voilà. Donc, avec les notes, je vais parler en anglais pour la plupart. All right, so we're talking about pronouns, and the focus of this chapter that we're working on in our class is on purchasing things, but then also on pronouns. That's going to be the focus for our grammar, will be on pronouns. And there are many pronouns. We did reflexive pronouns back in the earlier part of the year. We have studied me, te, nous, vous, le, la, les back in French too. And another pronoun is I. And so in fact, with this chapter on pronouns, we're going to start with the pronoun I, which you probably remember from last year. It's a very common pronoun in French, especially in conversational French, so we want to be sure we know that one. Okay, so this is our first pronoun that we're going to have in our notes. Okay, voila. So the first thing you need to know about pronouns is that they replace something. In English, they are used to replace nouns, okay? And in French, they're also used to replace nouns. But the pronoun I is a little bit different because it's not just used to replace nouns, it's also used to replace adverbial phrases or prepositional phrases, okay? But the point is that pronouns replace something, all right? I'm going to put nouns here because that's more of the classic definition in English, and it is true in French, although we're going to see that I is more than just a noun, okay? But the main thing is that pronouns replace something. So let's look at an example of how I is used. Tu vas à la fête? Oui, j'y vais. A very simple sentence. Are you going to the party? Yes, I'm going there. Okay, so here we have our pronoun, and it's replacing this phrase, à la fête. So you see that I is a pronoun, and it replaces something. Okay, so something always has to come out of the sentence when a pronoun is used. That's something else to remember. Something comes out when a pronoun is used. Also notice that in English, I could say, are you going to the party? Yeah, I'm going. No pronoun. But in French, you have to have this pronoun I. So you might just kind of put in your notes that I is used in French even when we don't translate it in English. That's important. Are you going, like I said, are you going to the party? Yeah, I'm going to go there. In French, they have to put the word there. Okay, so that's an introduction to I. When you're studying pronouns, there are certain things you always have to know about pronouns. First of all, you need to know what the pronoun is. In this case, it's I. You need to know what it means in English. And then you need to know where it goes in the sentence. Okay, in I, we're going to add a few more than just those three things, but those are the three basic things you always need to know about a pronoun. So, number one, what is the pronoun we're working with? It's I. Number two, what does it mean? And I'll go over to this board for that. Okay, what does I mean? Well, I generally translates as the word there. Not always. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute when it doesn't mean there, but it generally translates to the word there. And that's because I is used to replace any preposition followed by a noun, or a noun introduced by a preposition. So I is the equivalent of a preposition, and here are some prepositions. These aren't all the prepositions, they're just some of them. À, to, at or in, sur, on, sous, under, dans, in, chez, at the home of, and en, in, like en France or en Italie. So any preposition that's followed by a noun. And I think my marker's about to run out. Okay? I replaces, all of this would come out, and I would go in its place. So you can see how I is kind of handy. It's very short, one letter, and it replaces all of that. All right, so another example would be je mets les fleurs if I can fit that in, les fleurs sur la table. I put the flowers on the table. I put them there. So, sur is a preposition. La table is the noun. All of that comes out, and I can use e to replace it. And then I have to think about where it goes. It's going to go before the verb, and we're going to get to that next. Okay? But the main thing is that e can be translated as there, and e replaces a preposition plus a noun. Okay, that's number 2. Okay, number 3, the third thing we need to know about e. Number 1, we know that we're working with the pronoun e. Number 2, we know how to translate and how to use it. Number 3 is where does it go in the sentence? And this is really important for all of the pronouns that we are going to study and that we have studied. When you have a pronoun, whether it's e or en or me, te, nous, vous, le, la, les, all those pronouns, you always have to be concerned with la position. And I'm sure you've heard me say this before. La position. Where does the pronoun go in the sentence? And in English, the pronoun usually goes after the verb. I put the flowers there. That's correct in English, right? I'm going to the beach. I'm going there. The there goes after the verb. In French, it doesn't go after the verb. It goes before the verb. So we're going to have several kinds of sentences. In a regular sentence, like the kind that we've been making, the position of the pronoun is before the conjugated verb. I can fit all those letters in there, before the conjugated verb. Now, you're going to want to highlight or circle the word before. Where you have the word position, you're going to want to put the word before, because that's the key thing. Okay? The pronoun goes before the verb. In English, it goes after. So an example of this would be, je vais à la plage. I go to the beach. I'm going to take out à la plage, replace it with e, and it's going to go before the verb. Here's the verb, so it's going to go right there. So my new sentence is j'y vais. Right? J'y vais, before the verb. I there go. D'accord? Okay, that's a regular sentence because it just has one conjugated verb, a simple sentence. Now this is true even in a negative sentence. Okay, so let's suppose I were to say, I don't buy, let's see, I don't buy stamps at the post office. I buy them at the grocery store, actually. Okay, so je n'achète pas les timbres à la poste. It's a fine sentence, but I want to make it a little bit shorter, and I want to say I don't buy stamps there. So à la poste comes out. It's replaced with e. And where does e go? Before the conjugated verb. Here's the conjugated verb. So e has to kind of sneak in right between ne and achète. So it's going to look like this. Je n'y achète pas les timbres. I don't buy stamps there. So the point is that when you have a negative sentence, the e still gets placed right before the verb. It kind of bumps ne backwards a little bit, and e gets to go right before the verb. Okay? So, avant le verbe conjugué. Okay, that's a regular sentence. But what about another kind of sentence? How about if you have, go like this, a passé composé sentence. So we're still talking about position. Where does the pronoun go? Well, it depends on what kind of sentence it is. If it's a regular sentence, it goes before the verb. In a passé composé sentence, it's going to go before, that's our magic word, before the helping verb. Okay, so you remember passé composé. You have either avoir or être plus the past participle. So the avoir or être is the helping verb. So if I were to say I bought, what I bought some detergent, de la lessive, at the convenience store. Okay, so here's à la supérette, gets replaced with e. Then I look and I'm thinking, okay, it goes before the verb, but that's a verb, that looks like a verb, which verb does it go with? So if it's in the passé composé, it goes before the helping verb, that means avoir. So e would go here. J'y ai acheté de la lessive. Okay, before the helping verb. Okay, that's for a passé composé sentence. There are two other kinds of sentences we need to go over. Okay, the third kind of sentence after our regular sentence before the conjugated verb, B was our passé composé before the helping verb, and C is going to be when there's an infinitive in the sentence. When there's an infinitive in the sentence. For example, instead of saying I go to the party, you might want to say I want to go to the party, or I am going to go to the party, or I'm able to go to the party. When you have an infinitive, where's the pronoun going to go? It's going to go before the infinitive. Okay? For example, nous voulons rentrer, rentrer, need the infinitive, rentrer chez nous. We want to go back home. We want to go home. Okay? So here's chez nous. That's a prepositional phrase. So I'm going to take out chez nous, replace it with e. It goes before the verb, but looks like I've got two verbs. So one of the verbs is an infinitive. So if it is an infinitive, it goes before the infinitive. So that e goes right there. Okay? It's really easy to get this rule and the passé composé rule confused, but you have to know the difference between an infinitive and a past participle. So nous voulons y rentrer. Okay? So all these different kinds of sentences and the placement of the pronoun varies. It's always before something, but it varies depending on what kind of a sentence it is. Okay, so let's go on to our last kind of sentence, which would be D in our notes, and that is the imperatif. Remember the imperatif? That's the command. We kind of go like that in class, right? The imperatif. Okay, there are two kinds of imperative sentences. There's affirmative and there's negative. I could say go there, that's affirmative, or I could say don't go there, obviously negative. Now, if you've forgotten about the imperative, maybe I'll make another video about that, but imperative is command, right? No subject. You don't have a subject. All right, so let's suppose I were to say, you go there. You're going to the party, you're going there. So I'm going to write tu y vas. It already has the pronoun in it. That's a regular sentence. Now I want to make it a command. So what do I do to make it a command? Remember, I get rid of my tu. I drop an S if it's an ER verb. Now I'm stuck with that pronoun at the very front. Remember, we've talked about how le pronom il a peur, il n'aime pas être devant le verbe. Alors the pronoun goes on a little walk. It hides, we say, after the verb. So now it's going to be vas-y. And oddly enough, that S comes back for pronunciation, but that's That was a tricky example that I gave you. So vas-y, so the pronoun goes after the verb. So for the first time, we have the word after. So put that in your notes, maybe highlight it, circle it. This is the only time where the pronoun comes after the verb is in an affirmative imperative sentence. In a negative imperative sentence, the pronoun goes back where it belongs before the verb. So I want to say, don't go there. Tu n'y vas pas. That means you don't go there. That's not yet a command. Now I want to make it a command, so I'm going to take away the tu, take away the s, and I'm done. N'y vas pas. Because in a negative command, the pronoun goes back where it belongs before the conjugated verb. Okay? So position. Position is really important. So we have that we're talking about the pronoun e. We know what it means. It means there. We know how to use it. It's used to replace a preposition plus a noun. And then finally, where it goes in the sentence. Before, before, before. You just have to pay attention to which, before what. Before the conjugated verb, before the helping verb, etc. Okay, so a really big part of our notes. The last thing we need to go over is the green box on page 156. Remember I said at the beginning that was part of our notes number 2. We said that E means there. And I said, well, most of the time it means there, but not always. Well, if you look at the green box, I can explain why it doesn't always mean there. The green box on page 156 says that there are some verbs that just use a, just because. And you remember that jouer is one of those verbs, okay? It means to play a sport. So back in French 1, you learned how to say I play baseball, and you learned that you had to say je joue à le baseball. Because jouer à is used with sports. And then we remember, okay, you can't have a and lo together, that becomes o. All right, so if somebody asks you the question, do you play baseball? Est-ce que tu joues au baseball? And you want to say, yes, I do. I play it. You would say, je joue au baseball. But if you wanted to take out au baseball and replace it with a pronoun, what pronoun are you going to use? Well, you're going to use e because you got a plus a noun. And I put it before my verb, j'y joue. But how does that translate? I play there? No, I play it. So e can also translate as it, particularly when it's being used with the verbs on page 156. Another example, how about the verb assister? Remember that verb? To attend. We are attending a concert. Okay, and here I have a, take out a, replace it with e, and it goes before my verb. Nous y assistons, we attend it. Okay, it wouldn't make sense to say there, it makes sense to say it. So when you come across a, and it's used not with a place, but with a noun, like just a thing like baseball or concert, it's not going to make sense to translate it as there. 90% of the time it will mean there, but in these kinds of sentences, it's going to best translate as it. Okay? Particularly with the verbs on page 156, you might want to copy those. If you don't know what they mean, be sure to look them up so you know how to use them. Voilà, that was a lot. So, on a fini. À la prochaine. Au revoir.